Good day to you and buenos dias. I wanted to get us out of the house today to show you some more of the real Mexico and blend it into today's lecture. So I've ridden my bike about 3.5 miles away to a place called Cerritos Point, where after I'm done with the video, I'm going to walk over to those oyster shells that you might be able to see over there and collect a bunch of those to bring home for my plants in my garden. Cerritos Point is, I guess, a very typical place in Mazatlan, Mexico. We are living on the coast here in Mexico. Not all Mexicans do, but this is a typical coastal situation. And I want to take you around here as I describe why I'm showing you Mazatlan in this particular way today. This is a place that is what we would call rustic. It's rustic because no electricity, right? You see trash as well. No infrastructure for trash removal down here. Yeah, typical of a developing country. Just the basics for people to get by. And over here now we have a group of rustic restaurants. These are restaurants, again, with no electricity. They do have some running water, but it's very limited. Bathrooms are very primitive, basically a hole in the ground. And these boats that you see here, most of the boats are out at sea right now. It's in the morning here in Mazatlan, and those boats have gone out to sea, most of them, and they're going to be bringing back oysters, clams, many different kinds of fish, octopus, lobster, and then they sell it at these restaurants. You go up there and you sit on a plastic chair and you order something that's going to come on a tostada, a corn tortilla. It's going to be crab. It's going to be ceviche, which is a kind of, it's a mixture of shrimp and fish and vegetables and lime. And that's the real Mexico. A developing country. No brand names. No Ruby Tuesday, big illuminated sign outside. No Jack in the Box. No Phillips seafood like you have down there at the shorts. It's the basics. It's a developing country. And here in this developing country, my wife and I have been watching a soap opera. I guess you would call it a soap opera. It's a telenovela. It's one that one of you in the class recommended called Who Killed Sarah? And I tell you what, I'm going to move away from this. It's a little bit too noisy with the surf. The Who Killed Sarah has us riveted. We can hardly find a reason to not come home each night and watch the next episode, as this very typical structure of a telenovela takes place, where you have a division between rich people and poor people, or established people and unestablished people. In this case, it's the very rich and powerful Lascano family, which is headed by Don Cesar. Don Cesar owns a casino, and he's up to all kinds of bad behavior, including impregnating his son's wife and impregnating the girlfriend of the male who was sent to prison for the murder of Sarah. In other words, impregnating Sarah. And he owns a casino, and he's running a brothel in the basement of it. And it has a lot of very traditional elements of Spanish soap opera drama as they try to play out class differences and the differences between what people with wealth and power can get away with and what people who don't cannot get away with. And so this is the bridge for what we're studying today, because today we're taking on the South African soap opera. Show you some of the shops here. Again, primitive shops at night. These all have to close. There's no electricity down here. Yeah, we're taking on South Africa today, which, like Mexico, is a developing country. Yeah, South Africa also is trying to build infrastructure. South Africa is trying to eradicate disease. South Africa is still trying to achieve literacy in the country. South Africa is a developing country. And before we get to soap operas, it really does help to know some history about South Africa. South Africa originally was colonized by the Portuguese. And then after the Portuguese left, the Dutch arrived. And the Dutch colonized South Africa. And then the British came after the Dutch and also colonized South Africa. So you have these three invading powers, all bringing their culture and their routines and their rituals to South Africa and their languages. In the midst of this, you have an inequality that existed in South Africa for many, many years called apartheid, which is racial segregation. It basically created separate institutions for black people, black South Africans, versus white people made up of British and Dutch. And apartheid was not actually done away with until recently. We're talking the 1990s. So South Africa has some different conditions from Mexico in that it's trying to still heal from racial injustices, trying to heal and also trying to forge an identity that is uniquely South African. It is not like any other country in Africa, because South Africa is not like any other country in Africa. And so this is our entry point for talking about the soap opera today. And by the way, that term soap opera, that's an American phrase. And it comes from the idea that those original operas, they were mini operas because operas themselves have storylines where you have a lot of drama that is very similar to what opera spoke about affairs and about betrayals, etc. But soap was the kind of product that was used to sponsor most of these programs as American media grew up as commercial media, right? So the soap opera is referring really to a format of fiction that was funded by a product, a soap product. So we're talking about the soap opera in Africa today, and television is dominated by the soap opera in Africa. And the reason for that is because the soap opera is playing an important part in the healing of South Africa and also the forging of identity, this new identity for South Africa. So we're going to explore the soap opera in more terms today as we continue on. And the soap opera, the most important one that I'm sending you a link for today also that we're going to talk about, is a soap opera called Uzalo, Blood is Forever. Uzalo, Blood is Forever. It was in the 1990s in South Africa that television started to become a site for the healing of the nation. Started to become a place where content was created and accessed by audiences to help develop a culture for South Africa, develop a style of clothing that's uniquely South African, accommodate many different languages. There are 11 languages in South Africa, and also try to position race as being a factor in the healing of the nation rather than in the division of the nation. And so we have kind of an opposite situation going on in South Africa compared to some of these other countries that we looked at. Yes, we're seeing a lot of redundancy as we go through each and every country in terms of some trends, but the trend that is different about South Africa is soap operas are not used to build a generic national image. Soap operas are used to build local identities, to preserve those local identities which otherwise would be lost in all the colonial invasions and the reconstruction of a post-apartheid South Africa. Continuing on with the soap opera now, the authors for this chapter call the soap opera the perfect television form. I think it's very interesting that it could be a misstatement when you read the chapter if you don't focus on it. And it's really saying that TV as a medium is perfectly suited for this kind of storytelling, especially when you throw in commercial breaks, which you can put in there when the drama starts to get intense between two characters who are embraced in a suspicious stare, and then you go to the commercial. Television has all the elements to allow the storytelling in the form of soap operas to be very, very effective. And soap operas are very effective, are they not? We're watching them, right? We may not consider ourselves to be watching soap operas. We may consider ourselves to be watching dramas or to be watching fiction on television, but that's what soap operas are. That's what telenovelas are. They are realistic fiction. At least we think it's realistic. I can tell you when I'm watching this casino operator, Don Cesar, and we're watching him having affairs. It seems real, but is it really real? Would he really be able to get away with that? Here's some mangoes being sliced up here. Beautiful fresh fruit. Probably cost you about $1 for a cup of that. So soap operas they're believable, right? They're not, we know they're not real, but they are not so far out of the bounds of our reasoning that we consider the story to be just so off the wall that it's not believable. That's not what soap operas do. And they have a linear narrative structure. There's a linear structure that means that the plot goes along in a line. And there are several lines. The lines can be between two characters over here and two characters over there. And the plot proceeds over the course of half an hour or an hour or 40 minutes. And each scene is succeeded by the next scene, succeeded by the next scene. You don't go back in time. That's why they have a linear structure. So there's a very powerful and important art form is basically the case that's being made here. Now, there was a law in South Africa in 2016 which formalized making soap operas focus on local cultures. 2016 policy incentives, that's what they referred to in the chapter, policy incentives. And there was a decision made that if you're going to produce soap operas that have a lot of local content to them, then those soap operas are not going to be marketable across the world. Like the soap opera I'm watching right now, it's focusing on a casino in Mexico, but it could be a casino in Las Vegas. It could be a casino in China. It could be a casino anywhere in the world because of the way that it's talked about, at least in terms of the activities that are taking place that are the basis of the plot. That is not what's happening in South African dramas. They have made a decision that if they're going to focus on local, content, then they are going to lose the export market. And that's a sacrifice that South Africans so far have been willing to make because they want to use the soap opera as a vehicle to promote local identity. And so now we move to the television landscape so that we get a broader understanding of television in South Africa. And like some of the European countries we've discussed, there are some similarities here. There are similarities in terms of there's a big public broadcaster that's funded by state monies. It's called the SBA, the South African, let's see if I have that right, SABC, sorry, South African Broadcasting Corporation. It was modeled on the BBC to a certain extent, that if you own a TV set, you pay for a license fee. The license fee then pays for the programming that's created for this company, which has 3 channels. So it's got SABC 1, SABC 2, and SABC 3. But what's different about the setup in South Africa compared to Europe is one of those channels, SABC 3, actually is a commercial channel that's owned by the government. So it's a commercial channel that runs advertising. The original mission of the SACB was to try to accommodate the 11 different languages that exist in South Africa, some of them tribal languages, so that these languages don't go away. They're a part of history and a part of culture. And so you have most of South African television is dominated by this SABC network, even though there are community stations and there are commercial stations and there are subscription stations just like we have. But once again, the government makes itself a player in the overall media offerings. Let me show you another glimpse of Mazatlan scenery here. Those waves are actually extremely dangerous. I can tell you from firsthand. I had to save my daughter from drowning one time. I was so fortunate that I had swimming lessons. The undertow is very, very dangerous out here. And in fact, that beach that you just looked at was called Playa Bruja, which is Witch's Beach. There are, of course, many other beaches down here which are calm, but you have to be careful when you're swimming in the Pacific. Let's move on now to talk about some broadcasting legislation. Passing some shops here. Typical Mexican shops. I'm sure even if you've never been to Mexico, you've seen these kinds of shops and the goods that they sell. Terracotta pottery right there. Typical gift shop. So we walk through this section here. just giving some sights and sounds of Mexico. So we're talking about broadcasting legislation now. And like a lot of countries, they passed telecommunications reform acts in the 1990s, and South Africa was one of them. We also did in the USA with the Telecommunications Act. But in South Africa, they have the SAB Act, the South Africa Broadcasting Act of 1999. And then later they passed another act called the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. And both of these together were trying to set up a procedure so that broadcasters could be regulated in the following areas. And when I mention these areas, I want you to consider how this fits into forging a national identity. So one area is diversity, to make sure that broadcasters are offering a diversity of all the different cultures, and that does include the colonial cultures, as well as obviously the indigenous African cultures in Africa. So diversity is a big feature of these two laws that were passed. Secondly, universal access to media, making sure that people have access to television, even if you can't afford cable, that you can get access to television through over-the-air signals. Third is public interest, to make sure that the media are operating in the public interest. If you're watching a news show at night in America on American television, and you hear, wait till you hear what's happening next with our weather, and then they go on to several commercials, making you stay until the end of the program before you can hear the weather forecast, I submit to you, is that in the public interest? No, that's not in the public interest. That's in the interest of trying to get that station to maintain its audience across the commercial break by teasing you that some information is coming up that you haven't heard yet on the weather. There's a big lizard on the sidewalk here. See if he moves away. They're pretty quick, actually. Hey, buddy. So anyway, to continue on with the other areas that are addressed by regulation, next up is promotion of South African identity. What makes South Africa in terms of how it's represented in the media? Again, the foods that people eat, the languages that they speak, the politics that are discussed, the clothing that people are wearing, the hairstyles. All of this is about culture, the things that cultures make. All of this is to be promoted in media content. And then finally, to empower previously disadvantaged people, which is really about black South Africans being shut out of the political system through apartheid for all those years. It wasn't until the 1990s until Nelson Mandela, a hero to many people worldwide, practiced many of the teachings of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, actually, spent over 25 years in jail, finally got out of jail and became the first black president of South Africa. In South Africa, there is a regulatory body like we have the FCC in the United States. The regulatory body, here's one of those green buses that comes around. It's only $1. Actually, it's 50 cents. Yeah, you hop on those, you can go anywhere you want down here. So the ICASA, it's a long acronym, is the regulator of South African broadcasting, just like the FCC is a government regulator. Again, you may think it's an automatic. It's not, that a country has designated a federal agency to make sure that broadcasters are adhering to the law. And part of the regulation is very quantitative. I mean, they have this elaborate point system you can read about in the chapter where they're scoring South African content in terms of its value of its local content. And that value is calculated by how many times a program airs, like if a soap opera airs once and then it airs again, that has a certain point value system, and the time slot that it's airing in. Is it airing in prime time? Is it airing in the afternoon hours when not so many people are watching? Or is it in prime time, 8 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night? This point system is it's very, very interesting to rank the extent to which local content is showing itself in South African media content, and thereby having an impact on people. So that brings us finally to the documentary, Uzalo. Uzalo, the documentary, it's an SABC documentary. It was started in 2015, And it's in the native African language of isiZulu. isiZulu, and in fact, Zulu culture is what is meant to be highlighted in this soap opera. And in fact, English is only shown in subtitles. You want to watch the soap opera, you have to watch it with English subtitles. But at the same time, the scripts are written in English. The scripts are written in English. So the structure of the language of English is used to formulate the plots, but then it's translated into Zulu language to communicate local culture. I found that to be very, very interesting. And finally, this soap opera is shot in Durban, which is a smaller city, whereas most of the other soap operas are shot in Johannesburg. This is shot in Durban. And when you shoot a soap opera or any media production, part of the purpose of it is not just about creating content that people are going to find interesting and want to watch. It's also about giving jobs to local people and not people flying in from out of country to pick up their work. I want to show you one of these trucks here. Red trucks, they're called, or aurigas. And you see some freedoms that they have here in Mexico. That's a transportation method here in Mexico. You can put 10 people in the back of a truck and they'll take you all over. You can listen to music back there. They'll play music. They play a lot of Michael Jackson down here, a lot of Creedence Clearwater Revival. Those are the most popular American content that I hear down here. You can drink beer in the back of those if you want to. Yeah, the red trucks. Yeah. All right, so then this is going to wrap up our conversation about South African media, also blending in Mexico and Cerritos Point. Okay, Tangwa Bendia. I hope you have a great day.